The road, what little there was left of it, dwindled into a pitted track swallowed by an aggressive green. My old pickup, reliable but protesting, clawed its way through the Pacific Northwest wilderness, the towering firs pressing in like silent judges. Rain had been a constant companion since I'd crossed the state line, a weeping prelude to Blackwood Manor. I hadn't seen Great-Aunt Elara in years, not since I was a kid, really. Her death, sudden and solitary, had been delivered by a terse phone call from the estate lawyer, a man whose voice seemed perpetually coated in dust. "Blake," he'd said, "he left it all to you." All of it. Blackwood Manor. I'd driven out here seeking not just an inheritance, but an escape. A fresh start, they called it. I called it a necessary amputation from the life that had become too heavy, too gray. The tragedy, still a raw ache beneath my ribs, was something I needed to outrun, and this isolated, inherited world felt like the perfect place to bury myself. Then I saw it. Blackwood Manor wasn't just a house. It was a monument to forgotten grandeur, a hulking silhouette against the perpetually overcast sky. Gables and turrets jutted like skeletal fingers, and the dark wood, stained by decades of rain, seemed to absorb the scant light. Vines, thick as my forearm, had scaled the stone foundations, clawing their way up to the eaves, their tendrils pushing into window frames like inquisitive, hungry things. The front gate, a wrought iron beast twisted with rust, hung crooked on a single hinge, a silent invitation to a place time had forgotten. I killed the engine, and the sudden quiet was deafening, broken only by the drip of rain from the trees and the distant, mournful cry of a bird. A chill, more than just the damp air, seeped into my bones. This wasn't just old. It felt ancient, burdened with unseen weight. Stepping out, the gravel crunched under my boots, a sound swallowed instantly by the moss-laden ground. The air smelled of wet earth, decaying leaves, and something else. A faint, sweet, sickly scent, like overripe fruit mixed with damp soil. I pulled my worn duffel from the truck bed, the weight a familiar comfort. The massive oak door, weathered to a deep, bruised purple, groaned on its hinges when I pushed it open. Inside, a cavernous foyer greeted me, plunged into perpetual twilight. Dust motes danced in the slivers of weak light that pierced the grimy stained glass windows above the landing. My breath plumed in the cold air. I ran my hand along a carved banister, feeling the gritty film of dust that coated everything. The place was a mausoleum, a testament to a life lived in profound seclusion. Elara, the reclusive botanist. Now I understood why. This place demanded full attention, full surrender. I started my exploration methodically, room by room, trying to make sense of the sprawling emptiness. The parlor was a tableau of faded elegance, draped sheets covering skeletal furniture like ghosts awaiting a seance. Each room was a relic, untouched, undisturbed, hinting at a life abruptly ended. Then I found it, in a small alcove off the main hall, a peculiar potted plant. It wasn't like any houseplant I'd ever seen. Its leaves were a deep, almost black green, thick and waxy, and they pulsed with a faint, almost imperceptible shimmer under the dim light. Instead of a conventional stem, a gnarled, root-like structure emerged from the soil, twisting like muscle. The sweet, sickly scent I'd noticed outside was stronger here, emanating directly from this plant. It felt wrong, unnatural. This was my event, the first tangible sign that Elara's eccentricities ran deeper than just reclusiveness. I left the plant, an unsettling presence, and continued deeper into the house. My path eventually led me down a narrow, unlit corridor, the air growing noticeably cooler. A low, persistent thrumming vibrated faintly through the floorboards. It was a mechanical sound, out of place in this silent, decaying mansion. Following the hum, I pushed open a heavy wooden door, revealing the laundry room with humming machines. It was surprisingly functional, though equally neglected. 2 industrial-sized washing machines and a dryer stood against one wall, their metal bodies dulled with age. The humming came from them, a deep, resonant vibration that seemed to fill my chest. Water pipes, thick with condensation, snaked along the ceiling, some dripping steadily into small, green-filmed puddles on the concrete floor. As I surveyed the room, my gaze snagged on something behind one of the washing machines. A patch of wall, damp and discolored, was covered in a growth I couldn't identify. It wasn't mold, not exactly. It was a network of fine, hair-like filaments, a vibrant, sickly yellow spreading outward like a spider web. And interwoven with the filaments were small, fleshy nodules, glistening faintly. They reminded me of strange fungi, but with an unsettling organic quality, almost like tiny, pale organs. This was my reveal, a discovery that solidified the creeping unease. Elara wasn't just a botanist. He was cultivating something that thrived in the damp, forgotten corners of her manor. I knelt, a prickle of revulsion making the hairs on my arms stand up. The air around the growth felt strangely warm, almost humid. I didn't touch it, couldn't bring myself to. The humming machines vibrated around me, a constant, unsettling drone, as if they were powering the very life that now infested the walls of Blackwood Manor. This wasn't just a house. It felt like a living, breathing entity, and I was now inside its lungs. The old pickup sighed a final plume of exhaust, a small, defiant cloud against the overwhelming green. Inside Blackwood Manor, silence pressed in, thick and velvety. I'd spent the last few hours trying to impose some semblance of order on the living room, clearing a space for my duffel bag and a few boxes of books. The air itself felt ancient, heavy with the scent of dried leaves, forgotten paper, and something else. A faint, earthy sweetness that was almost cloying. I tried to whistle, but the sound felt thin and swallowed by the vastness. This wasn't just an old house. It was a tomb. Still, I told myself, it was my tomb now. A fresh start. A place to outrun the echoes of the past. A floorboard groaned upstairs, long and drawn out, like a sigh. Just the house settling, I reasoned, my voice a whisper in the quiet. It was an enormous place, full of drafts and timbers that had seen more than a century. The wind, even when barely stirring the firs outside, could find 1,000 ways to make a sound in here. But then, a distinct thump came from what sounded like the kitchen, followed by a soft, dragging noise. I froze, breath held. Nothing. Just the house. My imagination. I walked the perimeter of the living room, running a hand over the cold, rough stone of the fireplace, then the smooth, worn wood of a forgotten cabinet. Every surface held a story, a layer of time. That would feel normal. Productive. A small victory against the creeping sense of disquiet. Following the faint scent of stale bleach and damp, I eventually found the utility area. It was a cavernous space, deeper in the manor's bowels, leading to what appeared to be the cellar entrance. But first, the laundry room with humming machines. 2 industrial-sized washers and dryers stood like silent sentinels, their chrome dials dulled, their interiors smelling faintly of mildew. I loaded a machine with my travel-worn clothes, pouring in detergent from a bottle I'd brought. The rhythmic thump-swish-thump of the washing machine was a balm, a familiar sound in an alien place. Then I heard it again. Not a floorboard, not the wind. A faint, almost imperceptible murmur, like distant voices. It seemed to come from through the wall behind the dryers. For a moment, it was just the machinery. Then, a distinct, breathy sibilance. My scalp prickled. "Hello?" I called out, my voice sounding absurdly loud and thin. Only the insistent thrum of the machines remained. I shook my head, pushing off the wall. This place was getting to me. I was tired, alone, and clearly hallucinating. Determined to clear my head, I decided to explore. Elara's reputation as a botanist meant there had to be a conservatory. I hadn't seen it on the initial, rushed tour with the estate agent. I wandered through a labyrinth of dusty corridors, each door promising another forgotten room. I passed a library crammed with leather-bound tomes, a dining room where a massive spider-webbed chandelier hung like a dead thing, and what looked like a study, filled with peculiar dried plant specimens pressed under glass. The air grew steadily warmer, humid, and the cloying sweetness intensified. Then, at the very end of a long, narrow passageway, I found it. The wood of the door itself was warped, stained, and looked like it hadn't been opened in decades. I pushed. With a groan of tortured wood and a shower of dried leaves, it gave way. The air inside hit me like a physical thing. Hot, wet, and overwhelmingly fragrant. It was a smell of rich, damp earth, fermenting fruit, and something else. Something sharp and metallic. Before me stretched a vast glass-domed structure, Elara's conservatory. But it wasn't merely overgrown. It was choked. Monstrous, unfamiliar plants clawed at the glass panes, their leaves a riot of emerald, burgundy, and a sickly yellow-green. Some of them pulsed faintly, like slow, sluggish heartbeats, a sensation I felt more than saw. A bizarre, fleshy growth, like a colossal, pale fungus, clung to one wall, its surface glistening with a viscous dew. It looked disturbingly like a lung, slowly inflating and deflating. Strange bulbous flowers, the size of dinner plates, hung from heavy stems, their petals unfurling in unnatural symmetrical patterns. They weren't just beautiful. They were aggressive, pushing against each other, vying for space. I stepped further inside, the stone floor beneath my boots slick with condensation. It moved with a deliberate, organic intelligence that made my stomach clench. This wasn't just a garden. This was a living, sprawling entity. Inside Blackwood Manor, silence pressed in, thick and velvety. The air itself tasted old, like forgotten paper and the faintest hint of something green and earthy, a smell that tickled the back of my throat. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, not by eyes, but by the house itself. The silence wasn't empty. It was pregnant, waiting. A low thrumming started up somewhere deeper in the house, a steady, mechanical pulse. It was the laundry room with humming machines, I realized, as I passed a closed door that vibrated faintly. Elara must have left them running, or maybe a timer was set. I paused, my hand on the cold brass doorknob, wondering if I should investigate. The sound was oddly comforting, a small anchor of the mundane in a sea of disquiet. A sliver of pale greenish light bled from under a door at the very end. The smell of rich, damp soil, intensely sweet and cloying, grew stronger the closer I got. It was an insistent scent, a beckoning finger. I walked towards it, my footsteps muffled by the thick, patterned rugs that seemed to absorb sound. The air grew heavier, warmer, as if the house held a secret, beating heart in that direction. Pushing open the door, I stepped into a world apart. This wasn't a room. It was a jungle. The conservatory, I presumed. It was vast, stretching out like a glass-domed cathedral, but instead of stained glass and stone, it was a riot of green. Plants, unlike any I'd ever seen, climbed toward the distant ceiling, their leaves broad and fleshy, some with a metallic sheen, others a velvety purple. The air was thick with humidity, the kind that made my clothes cling and my skin prickle, and the earthy sweet scent was now overwhelming, almost intoxicating. Sunlight, filtered through the grimy panes of glass and the dense canopy, painted the interior in shifting shades of emerald and amber. Droplets of water, condensed on leaves, periodically fell with soft plinks onto the soil or the broadleaves below. It was beautiful, in a disquieting way, like a predator displaying its vibrant plumage. I waded in, drawn by the sheer strangeness of it all. Some plants had leaves like unfurling scrolls. Others were a web of delicate, almost crystalline filaments. A few bore strange, bulbous growths that pulsed faintly, as if they were slowly breathing. I reached out to touch a leaf, its surface surprisingly cool and smooth, like polished stone, but it retracted slightly at my approach, a subtle, almost imperceptible shift. My hand hovered, then I pulled it back. It felt alive, too alive. In a small, relatively clear alcove, nestled amongst a cluster of thick, ropey vines that coiled like sleeping serpents, I found a rough-hewn wooden desk. It was warped with moisture, its surface scarred, but remarkably, a stack of leather-bound journals lay upon it, seemingly untouched by the rampant growth. They were old, their covers cracked, and the pages within were yellowed and brittle. I picked up the topmost journal. Elara's precise, looping script filled the pages, faded in places, vigorous in others. The first few entries were typical botanical notes, Latin names, growth patterns, soil compositions. But as I flipped further, the tone shifted. Day 147, the new specimen from the Amazon basin shows remarkable adaptability. Its tendrils are seeking purchase with unprecedented speed. A certain vibrancy, a consciousness even, I dare say. My breath hitched. Consciousness! I turned more pages, my fingers rustling the dry paper. Day 212. The nutrient solution is working. The growth is exponential. I hear it now, the subtle hum beneath the earth. The root is awakening. It demands more. My eyes scanned frantically, skipping ahead. The entries became less scientific, more manic, almost desperate. Day 305. It's no longer contained. The walls, they weep. The manor breathes with it. My beautiful garden, my secret. The root hungers. I feel its pull, its ancient memory. It is inside me. I am the garden, and the garden. The air suddenly felt heavier, thicker, as if the plants around me were leaning in, listening. The soft plink of falling water drops now sounded like tiny, insistent taps. Elara wasn't just tending a garden. He was tending something else. And Blackwood Manor wasn't just its root system, it was its mouth. And I, Blake, had just walked right in. Into the emerald depths of the canopy above, and a single viscous drop, thick and dark, splattered onto my cheek. It wasn't water. The smell was earthy, yes, but underneath that, something else. A faint metallic tang, like old blood or rust. I wiped it away instinctively, a shudder tracing a cold path down my spine. The plants, their leaves unfurling in silent, slow motion, seemed to lean in closer, their emerald depths holding a gaze I couldn't quite decipher. I backed away, stumbling over a root that snaked across the stone floor like a dormant serpent. My eyes darted around the room, searching for an explanation, for a trick of the light, but the air remained heavy, thick, as if the very oxygen was being consumed by the verdant growth around me. I felt watched, not by an animal, but by something far older, far more rooted. The feeling clung to me as I hurried out, pushing through the heavy oak door that led back into the main house. It wasn't the wind, nor the groan of old timbers. It was deeper, more resonant, like a vast organic machine. But then, as I walked past the grand staircase, a small, antique silver frame on a side table tilted. Not a gentle wobble, but a distinct, deliberate shift, as if an invisible hand had nudged it. I stopped, staring at it. It was a faded photograph of Elara, younger, her smile a thin, enigmatic line. The frame remained at its new, crooked angle. "Hello?" I called out, my voice swallowed by the high ceilings. Only the house's low thrum answered. My phone, a flimsy shield against the encroaching strangeness, felt like my only tether. I pulled it from my pocket, the screen a comforting glow in the dim hallway. No signal. I frowned. That was odd. I'd had a decent signal here yesterday. I walked to the nearest window, then to another, then to the front door, trying every corner of the ground floor. Nothing. Not a single bar. Frustration, sharp and unwelcome, began to prick at the edges of my fear. I decided to try the landline, a relic I'd barely noticed until now, sitting on a dusty table in the study. Dead air. No dial tone. I pressed the cradle down, lifted it again. Still nothing. I tried a different phone in the kitchen, then one in the master bedroom. All dead. It was as if every line had been severed, deliberately, methodically. This wasn't a coincidence. This wasn't bad luck. The house felt like it was actively isolating me, drawing the curtains, locking the doors, cutting the wires. I paced, my thoughts racing. What was happening? Was it a power outage? But the lights were working. My phone was charged. The low hum of the house seemed to intensify, a subtle vibration under my feet. I walked toward the back of the house, needing to move, needing to do something. I found myself in the laundry room with humming machines. The washing machine was mid-cycle, churning with a rhythmic slosh and spin, the dryer beside it emitting a steady, warm drone. The mundane sounds were a momentary comfort, a small pocket of normalcy in a house that felt increasingly alien. I leaned against the cool, tiled wall, trying to rationalize. Maybe a storm had knocked out the lines, but the sky outside was clear, a pale, indifferent blue. As I stood there, catching my breath, I noticed my reflection in the polished chrome door of the dryer. For a fleeting second, it wasn't quite right. I blinked, and the reflection snapped back to normal, just my tired, worried face staring back. My heart hammered against my ribs. I pushed off the wall, feeling a sudden, desperate need to get out. I rushed to the back door, fumbling with the heavy bolt. It was stiff, unusually so. I yanked, grunted, put my full weight into it. The bolt slid back with a loud, grating crack. I pulled the door open, stepping out onto the overgrown path. The air outside was cool, but it offered no relief. The trees, tall and ancient, seemed to lean in, their branches weaving a dense, impenetrable canopy that blocked out the sky. And in one of those windows, high up, I thought I saw a flicker, a movement. The house was watching me, and it didn't want me to leave. The viscous drop still felt like it clung to my cheek even hours later. I'd scrubbed at the spot until the skin was raw, but the memory, the faint metallic tang, refused to wash away. Sleep, when it finally came, was a fractured thing, riddled with images that felt less like dreams and more like an unwelcome intrusion. I was back in the conservatory, but it was altered, warped. The plants weren't just reaching, they were grasping. Their tendrils, thick as my arm, writhed with a slow, deliberate motion, their surfaces slick and glistening. I saw the familiar emerald hues, but now shot through with veins of pulsing violet like bruised flesh. The scent was cloying, a sweet, earthy perfume that turned sickly, like rot beneath honey. I could feel the roots, or something like them, coiling around my ankles, tightening, pulling me down into the rich, dark soil. My breath hitched. A desperate plea caught in my throat as the canopy above me pulsed, a rhythmic throb that mirrored a beating heart. Then, the emerald depths began to split, revealing not sky, but a single, vast, unblinking eye. Its iris a swirling vortex of green and black, fixed on me. The days that followed were a blurred progression of unease. Just the quiet, dust-mote-filled air. I'd find myself pausing, head cocked, straining to catch a word, a phrase, but it always dissolved into the house's general creaking and groaning. I gathered a load of dirty clothes, determined to do something mundane, something utterly ordinary. The laundry room with humming machines was a stark contrast to the rest of the manor. White tiles, sterile fluorescent lights, the rhythmic churn and thrum of the washers and dryers. It was supposed to be a reprieve, a small pocket of sanity. I dumped my clothes into a front loader, adding detergent, watching the suds bloom. But even here, it seeped in. I swore I could hear the faint, sweet, and sour scent of the conservatory clinging to my shirt, even before it went into the wash. My breath caught. I spun around, but the reflection of the room was undisturbed. Just me, reflected in the polished metal, looking a little too pale, a little too strung out. It wasn't a sound or a sight, but an internal compass veering off course. A strange, insistent curiosity, a magnetic draw that tugged at my thoughts. It started small, a fleeting urge to check a particular room, to re-examine a forgotten corner. But it grew, becoming more focused, more potent, until it settled on one direction, deeper into the manor, towards the older, more overgrown sections I hadn't fully explored. I followed it, a reluctant pawn to an unseen force. My footsteps echoed on the grand staircase, then softened on the decaying carpets of the less-used corridors. I found myself drawn to a small, unassuming antechamber I'd previously overlooked, tucked away behind a heavy velvet curtain. It was dim, unlit, the air stagnant. My hand reached out, guided by an instinct that wasn't my own, sweeping aside a layer of dust on a small, ornate table in the center of the room. And there it was. It was a spore, I realized, but unlike any I had ever seen. Its surface was smooth, almost gelatinous, with faint, intricate patterns etched into its skin like tiny, glowing veins. It shimmered, a living jewel in the gloom. My fingers trembled as I reached for it, a profound, undeniable compulsion seizing me. Every rational thought screamed at me to recoil, to leave it untouched, but a deeper, more primal urge overrode it all. My hand closed around the small, warm orb. It felt surprisingly soft, almost yielding, and the light intensified, bathing my palm in its sickly green glow. A wave of dizziness washed over me, and with it, a profound sense of rightness. The metallic tang from the drop, the earthy perfume from the dreams, they coalesced around this tiny, glowing thing. It felt ancient, alive, and utterly, terrifyingly connected to me. My fingers tightened around it, not wanting to let go, to consume it. The thought, alien and horrifying, was also strangely appealing. This wasn't just a spore. This was a seed, and I, Blake, was its soil. My mind kept replaying the image of that dark, glistening tendril, the way it had recoiled. It wasn't just a plant. It was deliberate. Sleep had been a fractured thing, riddled with the whisper of leaves and the phantom sensation of something cold brushing my skin. The next morning, I felt like a ghost haunting my own body, moving through the manor's dusty halls with a renewed sense of urgency. The journals. Elara's journals held the key, I was sure of it. I found the stack of leather-bound books where I'd left them, tucked away in her study. I picked up the thickest one, its cover worn smooth from years of handling, the pages brittle at the edges. The only spot that offered any semblance of normalcy, any hum of modern life, was the laundry room. It was down in the basement, a surprisingly functional space with industrial-sized washers and dryers. I tossed a load of my clothes in, the heavy thud of the damp fabric echoing in the cavernous room, then started a cycle. The rhythmic whirring and sloshing of the machines, a steady mechanical pulse, was strangely comforting amidst the manor's ancient quiet. I pulled up a rickety wooden stool, the journals clutched in my hands, and began to read. Elara's early entries were meticulous, scientific. Descriptions of fungal colonies, detailed sketches of peculiar mosses, observations on the manor's unique microclimate. She wrote about the deep roots of Blackwood Manor, not just metaphorically, but as if the house itself was an organism. Then a subtle shift. Her handwriting, once neat and precise, began to sprawl, her sentences gaining an almost poetic, yet unsettling lilt. Not sound, not truly. A resonance. A knowing. They speak of ancient things, of the earth's slow breath, of the deep hunger that stirs beneath the soil. I swallowed, a dry rasp in my throat. This wasn't the musing of a botanist. This was the unraveling of a mind. I flipped through more pages, the dates skipping forward, her descent accelerating. They demand sustenance, not water, not light, something richer. They have shown me. The manor itself thirsts. Sustenance? What could she mean? My mind immediately went to the strange growths, the tendrils, the viscous drop. The humming of the machines, once a comfort, now seemed to vibrate with a low, insistent drone, like a chorus of unseen things. I found a series of entries that became increasingly disjointed. A chaotic scrawl of scientific observation mixed with feverish, almost devotional language. She wasn't just feeding plants. He was feeding something that resided within the manor, something that had a will, a desire. They are not mere specimens, Elara had scrawled across 2 full pages, the words almost tearing through the paper. They are the veins, the arteries, the nerves of this place. They are the mind of Blackwood, and they are awake. They choose. They guide. This wasn't madness. Or rather, it was madness born of a horrifying truth. The plants weren't just communicating with Elara, they were controlling her. They were sentient. And they weren't just botanical specimens. They were something predatory, something ancient and deeply rooted, using the manor as its body, Elara as its willing or perhaps unwilling conduit. A sudden sharp thud from one of the washing machines made me jump, nearly dropping the journal. I stared at the machine, its churning insides a blur, the mechanical sounds suddenly menacing. The laundry room, with its bright lights and modern appliances, no longer felt safe. Elara's words had seeped into the very air, twisting my perception. The rhythmic thrumming of the motors now sounded like a heartbeat, slow and deep, echoing the pulse of the manor itself, a pulse that had been dormant, but was now, as Elara had written, awakening. And I was here, right in its veins. The warning from yesterday wasn't just about a plant. It was about the manor. It was about them. And they knew I was here. The words from Elara's journal clawed at the inside of my skull. They were controlling her. Not just influencing, not just communicating, but controlling. The implication coiled in my gut like a cold, slick worm. Sentient plants, not just specimens, but something else entirely. Something that had consumed my great-aunt, piece by piece, until nothing but its will remained. I stared at the faded ink, my breath shallow, each inhale tasting like dust and the faint, sweet decay of the manor itself. This wasn't a story of a reclusive botanist and her peculiar garden. This was a prelude to a nightmare, and I had walked right into it. I reread the last few entries, searching for anything I might have missed, any thread of a warning. Elara's handwriting had grown spidely, erratic, almost illegible in places. One particular paragraph near the end snagged my attention. The cleansing cycle, where the roots drink deep. A false front for a living gate. Below it, a tiny, almost imperceptible sketch. A crude rectangle with 3 small circles, like the dials of an old machine. My mind raced, trying to connect the dots. The hum, the cleansing cycle. It felt mechanical, domestic. But where the roots drink deep, that was the part that chilled me. A shiver traced its way down my spine, despite the relative warmth of the study. I needed to move, to act, to understand. The journal was a map, a twisted botanical treasure map to something I wasn't sure I wanted to find. I thought of the manor, the strange growths, the feeling of being watched. It all clicked into place with sickening clarity. This house wasn't just old, it was alive. And Elara had been its keeper, or perhaps its prisoner. The phrase, "the hum beneath the mundane," echoed in my mind. Where in this sprawling, creaking monument to a forgotten life was there a constant, mundane hum? My gaze drifted to the floorboards, then down the grand staircase. My feet carried me almost instinctively. The manor was vast, yes, but certain sounds were constant, persistent. The distant, rhythmic thrumming I'd dismissed as an old boiler, or maybe just the general groan of an ancient house, suddenly took on a new, ominous significance. It wasn't coming from the basement, not exactly. It was lower, deeper, but also closer than I'd thought. I descended the main staircase, the wood groaning beneath my weight, then navigated the labyrinthine corridors of the ground floor. I passed the dusty ballroom, the disused kitchen, the pantry that smelled faintly of forgotten spices. The hum grew louder, more distinct, a low, vibrating drone that seemed to resonate in my very bones. Finally, I reached a heavy, unassuming door tucked away in a back hall, almost hidden behind a faded tapestry. It was the door to the laundry room with humming machines. The sound here was undeniable, a rhythmic churning and sloshing, overlaid with the deep, resonant thrum I'd been tracking. This was it, the mundane hum. I pushed the door open. The air inside was thick with the scent of damp fabric and something vaguely metallic, like old iron. They were the source of the sloshing, their gears grinding a steady rhythm. I scanned the room, looking for anything that matched Elara's sketch. The walls were bare, painted a peeling institutional green. The floor was concrete, stained and cracked. My eyes traced the outline of the machines. 3 circles, 3 dials. The sketch. I knelt, examining the base of the central washing machine. Nothing. I ran my hand along the wall behind it, then beneath the heavy appliance itself. It was a small, rusted lever, almost invisible against the grimy floor. The living gate. With a grunt, I pulled the lever. A low, mechanical groan echoed from beneath the concrete, and a section of the wall behind the washing machines, previously indistinguishable from the rest, began to slide inward with a slow, agonizing shriek of metal on metal. A gaping black maw opened before me. Hesitantly, I stepped into the passage. The air immediately grew heavy, pressing in on me. The mechanical hum of the laundry room faded, replaced by a deeper, organic thrum that seemed to originate from the very stone around me. Each step I took sent a shower of damp earth crumbling down the narrow walls. The passage was barely wide enough for my shoulders, forcing me to hunch. The air grew warmer, humid, clinging to my skin. And the sound, it was no longer just a hum. It was a low, resonant thump-thump, like a giant, sluggish heart beating deep within the earth. Finally, the passage opened into a vast cavern. My flashlight beam danced across an impossible sight. This wasn't a basement, or even a natural cave. This was a living, breathing chamber. They glowed with a faint, internal luminescence, a sickly green light that pulsed in time with the deep, rhythmic thrumming that filled the space. Between the roots, enormous fungal growths erupted from the damp earth. Colossal, bell-shaped caps of mottled gray and purple, their undersides dripping with a viscous, clear fluid. Some of them pulsed too, not with light, but with an almost imperceptible expansion and contraction, like gills. The air was thick with spores, catching the weak light of my beam, swirling like dust motes in a forgotten attic. Not brick and mortar, but a vast living organism, its roots intertwined with the very foundations of the estate. Elara hadn't just cultivated a garden. He had unearthed, or perhaps grown, a monstrous subterranean ecosystem. The sweet, earthy smell was overwhelming now, sickly and intoxicating. I felt a strange pressure in my head, a dull ache behind my eyes. The thrumming intensified, vibrating through the soles of my boots, up my legs, into my chest. My flashlight beam swept across a particularly massive root, thicker than a tree trunk, that seemed to emerge from the ceiling and plunge deep into the earth. It was covered in a network of smaller, fibrous tendrils, some of which seemed to be subtly moving, unfurling like tiny, pale fingers reaching out into the humid air. This wasn't just a discovery. It was a revelation. Elara hadn't been tending a garden. He had been tending this. And whatever this was, it felt ancient, hungry, and terribly, terribly awake. I wasn't just in a hidden chamber. I was inside something enormous, something that seemed to perceive my presence, and I had the terrifying feeling that it was now perceiving me as a new potential host. Sentient plants. Not just specimens, but something else entirely. And now I was here. A cold tremor snaked down my spine. I stood frozen, the heavy journal still clutched in my hand, the faint scent of dried leaves and old paper mingling with the manor's deeper, earthier perfume. The air itself felt thicker, pressing in, as if the very walls were exhaling. It wasn't the house settling. It was too regular, too alive. I tried to shake it off, to attribute it to exhaustion, to the shock of Elara's revelations. My reflection in the dusty window glass seemed stretched, distorted, the lines of my face too sharp, my eyes too wide. I blinked, and it was gone. Just my own haggard image staring back. The paranoia was a physical weight now, settling on my shoulders. Every creak of timber, every sigh of wind outside seemed to carry a hushed message, just beyond the threshold of understanding. I walked, or rather drifted, through the manor, my movements less my own, more a guided exploration. My feet seemed to find their way to the lower levels, drawn by an invisible current. The rhythmic whirring and sloshing of the old industrial washers and dryers filled the space. A mechanical heartbeat in the ancient house. Steam plumed from a vent, momentarily obscuring my view. When it cleared, a figure stood there, indistinct, silhouetted against the bright metal of a dryer door. It was small, hunched, its head bowed. A child. My throat constricted. It was impossible. I was alone here. Hello? I managed, my voice a dry rasp. The figure didn't move. I took a step closer, my heart hammering against my ribs. Then, as I drew nearer, the steam billowed again, thicker this time, swirling around the small form. And when it cleared, the figure was gone. No, not gone. Its surface was slick, almost wet, and it pulsed faintly, rhythmically, in sync with the machine's hum. This wasn't just my imagination. This was real. Or rather, the manor was making it real. It was twisting my perception, grafting its own horrifying reality onto mine. A searing pain lanced through my temple. My vision swam, the laundry room blurring into a kaleidoscope of green and brown. You belong here. You are part of us. My past tragedy, the grief that had driven me to this isolated place, was being weaponized, distorted, used as a conduit for the manor's influence. The red toy car, a symbol of everything I'd lost, began to morph, its plastic shell rippling, stretching, becoming a vibrant blood-red leaf, unfurling from the pulsing root in the concrete. I stumbled back, hitting the wall with a dull thud. My hands felt clumsy, alien. The sense of being watched, of being entered, was overwhelming. My thoughts were no longer entirely my own. There were foreign impressions, ancient, slow-moving, like the growth of a forest, pushing into my consciousness. A profound sense of belonging, terrifying in its absolute certainty, began to seep into me. It was not a comforting embrace, but a suffocating one, like being swallowed whole by the earth itself. The root, Elara had called it. It wasn't just a physical network, it was a consciousness, vast and patient, and it wanted me. It wanted to consume my grief, my memories, my very identity, and make them part of its sprawling, hungry self. I was no longer Blake, just a host, a vessel, waiting to be fully assimilated. The chorus of whispers, 1,000 unseen mouths breathing the same terrifying truth, vibrated through my bones. You belong here. You are part of us. We are one. The words weren't spoken, not with air or vocal cords, but impressed directly into my mind, a chilling certainty that bypassed my ears entirely. I stood frozen in the laundry room with humming machines, the rhythmic thrum of the ancient mechanisms suddenly sounding less like simple machinery and more like a collective heartbeat, slow and deep. Blake. My name. I repeated it in my head, a desperate anchor. Blake. I was Blake. I was not them. But the certainty, the insidious conviction that had just been planted in my consciousness, gnawed at the edges of my identity. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a declaration. A claim. I had been reacting, observing, trying to understand. No more. This thing, whatever it was, had crossed a line. Not today. Not ever. My eyes swept the laundry room, searching for anything, a tool, a weapon. My gaze landed on an old, heavy-duty crowbar propped against a shelf, caked with dried mud and what looked like rust. It wasn't elegant, but it was solid. It was steel. It was defiance. I grabbed it, the cold metal a welcome shock against my clammy palm. The weight felt good, substantial. The conservatory. That was the heart, the nexus of the growth, the place where Elara had nurtured this monstrosity. If I could destroy it, if I could sever its connection to the outside, maybe I could starve it. Maybe I could break its hold. I moved, not cautiously, but with a new, frantic purpose. Each step echoed too loudly on the polished stone floors as I made my way out of the laundry room and through the labyrinthine corridors. Just the house playing its games. I wouldn't be deterred. The conservatory doors loomed ahead, massive and intricately carved, now almost completely obscured by the thick, leathery vines that had woven themselves into the wood. They pulsed faintly, a sickly green light emanating from beneath the leaves. The air here was heavy, humid, charged with an almost palpable energy. I raised the crowbar, my muscles tensing. "You want me?" I muttered, my voice hoarse. "Then come and get me." With a grunt, I brought the crowbar down, aiming for the gnarled vines wrapped around the doorframe. The impact was jarring. The vines didn't break. They flexed, absorbing the blow with a sickening elasticity. A low, guttural groan seemed to emanate from the very walls, a sound of immense displeasure. I swung again, harder, aiming for the glass panes of the conservatory itself. The first pane shattered with a glorious crash, shards raining down, reflecting the sickly green glow. It was a small victory, but it was something. But the house retaliated. Before the echoes of the breaking glass had faded, the vines around the doorframe began to move. Not just a tremor, but a deliberate, sinuous unfolding. They lashed out, whip fast, forcing me to duck and weave. One grazed my arm, leaving a stinging welt that immediately began to burn. The air in the conservatory grew thick, shimmering. The plants inside, immense and grotesque, seemed to stretch, their leaves unfurling with unnatural speed. From the depths of the tangled growth, a grotesque illusion began to form. It was Elara, her face, but distorted, elongated, her eyes black pits. He was part of the entity now, a puppet, a manifestation of its will, and he was mocking me. I ignored the vision, focusing on the destruction. I swung the crowbar like a madman, smashing more glass, tearing at the thickest vines I could reach. The floor beneath my feet seemed to shift, the very ground groaning. Then, a massive vine, thicker than my leg, shot out from the ceiling, moving with a speed that defied its bulk. It wrapped around my left ankle, pulling with impossible force. I stumbled, losing my grip on the crowbar as it clattered to the floor. Before I could regain my balance, another vine, thorny and prehensile, snaked around my right leg, pinning me. I fell hard, my head cracking against the stone floor. The vines tightened, digging into my flesh, sharp thorns piercing my skin. I thrashed, desperate, but it was like struggling against an oak tree. Suddenly, A sharp, searing pain shot through my left thigh. I cried out a raw animal sound. One of the hardened, sharpened branches, part of the conservatory structure that had been overgrown and weaponized, had impaled me as I fell. It was deep, a hot, throbbing agony that spread rapidly. Warm, sticky wetness bloomed beneath my hand as I instinctively pressed against the wound. Futility. You are ours, Blake. You always were. My strength drained, replaced by the crushing weight of pain and despair. I was pinned, bleeding, and the house, this monstrous living thing, was laughing. It wasn't just physical, it was a psychological assault, stripping away my will, my very self. The fight had been futile, I was trapped, and I was bleeding out. The world was a kaleidoscope of agony. My vision swam, each breath a serrated knife in my ribs. The laughter wasn't just in my head. It was a resonant hum beneath the floorboards, a vibrating tremor in the very air, mocking my broken form. I lay there, twisted against splintered wood and a thick, ropey growth that pulsed with a slow, sickening rhythm. My arm throbbed, slick with something warm and metallic smelling that I knew was my own blood. It wanted me to break. It wasn't just pain, though the pain was immense. It was a stripping away, a slow erosion of my will, my identity. Give in, Blake. Be one with us. It's so much easier. The whispers were soft, caressing, yet held the crushing weight of a collapsing mountain. But somewhere, deep within the fractured landscape of my consciousness, a spark refused to die. A stubborn, defiant ember. Elara. Her face, not the gaunt mad woman of the photographs, but the younger, vibrant botanist I'd imagined, flashed in my mind. She'd fought, hadn't she? Or had she? Succumbed? The question burned, fueling a desperate animalistic need to understand. I pushed. Every muscle screamed in protest, a symphony of torment. The growth that pinned my leg shifted, its surface surprisingly firm, like ancient petrified wood, yet undeniably organic. It scraped against my skin, sending shivers of revulsion through me. With a grunt that tore at my throat, I wrenched my leg free, leaving a fresh, stinging wound. Or perhaps it was amused. It had been playing with me. Staggering, I clung to a wall, the rough plaster crumbling under my trembling fingers. My head pounded, and a fresh wave of nausea threatened to buckle my knees. I had to move. Answers, a way out, anything. The oppressive gloom of the manor seemed to press in closer, its tendrils not just physical anymore, but woven into the very fabric of the air. I stumbled through a series of dimly lit passages, the floorboards groaning under my weight, each creak echoing the fractured state of my own body. It was the house's breath. It pulled me, a strange siren song in the quiet horror of the manor. The sound grew louder, steadier, a mechanical pulse in this organic tomb. I pushed open a heavy, warped door, revealing the laundry room with humming machines. The air in here was thick with the faint, stale smell of forgotten detergent and damp linen, a strange contrast to the pervasive earthy scent of the manor. 3 industrial-sized washing machines and 2 enormous dryers dominated the space, their metallic bodies scarred with rust and age. One of the washing machines was indeed humming, a low, continuous vibration that resonated through the floor and up into my aching bones. Against the far wall, a set of metal shelves sagged under the weight of ancient cleaning supplies and stacks of yellowed, brittle towels. My breath hitched. Elara's journal. I knew it somehow. With a burst of desperate energy, I lunged, knocking over the precarious stack of linen. The journal, surprisingly heavy, fell into my trembling hands. I flipped it open, my fingers fumbling. The script was Elara's, elegant yet increasingly erratic as the entries progressed. My eyes scanned frantically, skipping over meticulous botanical observations until I found it. The final entry, dated only days before her mysterious demise. The root hungers. It has always hungered. Not for sustenance as we understand it, but for communion. For integration. I see now that my efforts to merely study it were futile, childish. It does not wish to be observed. It wishes to be experienced. To be absorbed. My stomach twisted. Absorbed? My eyes raced down the page, the path laid out. It is not a prison, Blake, but a transcendence. Emerging. My blood, my very essence will feed it, yes, but it will also become me. And I, it. The cycle continues. The ancient ritual passed down through generations of caretakers, not victims, but willing participants in the grand design. Willing participants. The word struck me like a physical blow. Elara wasn't just a victim, he was complicit. Mad perhaps, but complicit. A caretaker. My great-aunt, the reclusive botanist, hadn't been fighting the thing in the walls. She'd been tending it, preparing herself for this horrific union. The sacrifice is not of life, but of self. To become the vessel, the conduit, the new host. It demands a choice, Blake. Always a choice. To resist is to wither, to be consumed without purpose. To embrace. The humming machine seemed to amplify the words, each thrumming beat echoing the insistent pulse of the root in the manor. It demanded a choice. Always a choice. I clutched the journal, my knuckles white. The house, this monstrous living thing, had not just taken Elara. It had seduced her, twisted her mind until she saw its grotesque consumption as a form of transcendence. And now, it wanted the same from me. The choice was stark, agonizing in its simplicity. Succumb, allow myself to be absorbed, to become a part of its vast, unholy network, or find a desperate, impossible means of escape. But how? How could I escape a house that breathed, that thought, that wanted to make me its root? The weight of its expectations settled upon me, heavier than any physical tendril, threatening to crush the last vestiges of my sanity. I clutched the journal, my knuckles white. And now it wanted the same from me. The choice was stark, agonizing in its simplicity. Succumb to the root, become another tendril in its vast subterranean network, or fight, even if fighting meant carrying a piece of its rot with me forever. My breath hitched, a ragged sound in the suffocating quiet. It was the house, breathing around me, its pulse a low thrum against the soles of my feet. It was a beckoning, a slow, insidious invitation to surrender. No, not me. A shard of defiance, cold and sharp, pierced through the haze of terror. Elara might have found peace in its embrace, but I wouldn't. I had lost too much already to willingly give up what little remained of myself. I had to get out. My legs felt like lead, but I forced them to move. I didn't look back. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to sever this connection, to tear myself free from its grasp. The hallway outside the study was a tunnel of shadows. The tapestries, once mere decor, now seemed to ripple, their patterns shifting like something alive underneath the fabric. The floorboards groaned with each step, not just from my weight, but as if the house itself was sighing, stirring. I knew the layout of the manor, or at least I thought I did. My path to the main doors was through the labyrinthine ground floor, past the dining hall, the kitchen, and then the servants' wing. It was a long way. The house seemed to stretch, its corridors elongating, the familiar architecture subtly warping. Just give in, Blake. Be one with us. I pressed a hand to my ear, trying to block out the insidious murmur, but it was inside my head, woven into the very fabric of my perception. I pushed through a heavy oak door, my hands slick with sweat, and found myself in the old servants' passage, a narrow, unlit stretch that smelled of dust and something metallic, like old blood. This wasn't the way I remembered it. The passage was usually brighter and shorter. A low, rhythmic sound began to pulse through the floorboards, growing louder as I moved. It was a mechanical hum, deep and steady, a strange counterpoint to the organic groans of the house. The room was bathed in a pale, sickly yellow light from a single bare bulb hanging from the ceiling. The air here was thick with the scent of ozone and stale water, a stark contrast to the earthy perfume of the rest of the manor. The humming was deafening, a drone that vibrated in my chest and skull, threatening to dislodge my sanity. And then I saw it. One of the industrial washing machines was not empty. They were being washed, churned in a murky reddish-brown liquid. The hum wasn't just the machines. It was the roots themselves, vibrating with an unnatural energy. This wasn't a laundry room. It was a processing chamber. The house was cleaning itself, or perhaps preparing its sustenance. This was a deeper horror than I had imagined. It wasn't just growing, it was maintaining itself. A grotesque, self-sustaining ecosystem. I stumbled backward, away from the churning roots, the metallic tang of fear sharp on my tongue. The humming seemed to intensify, mocking my revulsion. The house was everywhere, even in the mundane. There was no escape within its walls. Now, ignoring the urge to retch, I forced myself to move, past the horrifying machines, past the smell of ozone and wet earth. The exit was just beyond this room, I was sure of it. The massive front doors were within sight, a beacon of hope in the deepening gloom. But the house was not done with me. As I ran across the polished floor, the very air around me seemed to congeal. My vision blurred. I felt a searing pain, a burning sensation spreading across my left forearm. I glanced down, my breath catching in my throat. It pulsed faintly, a miniature heart beating beneath my flesh. The root. It had marked me. It had claimed a piece. Panic, raw and visceral, spurred me forward. I slammed into the heavy front doors, shoving with all my might. They groaned, resisting as if the house was exhaling, pushing back against my escape. With a final desperate surge of adrenaline, I tore open the doors. I had escaped. But as I ran, the burning sensation in my arm intensified, a constant reminder. I could feel it, a subtle connection, a faint, persistent hum that wasn't from any machine. A piece of the root was with me now, a seed planted deep. I was free, yes, but irrevocably changed. And I, Blake, was now a carrier, a living tendril forever connected to the enduring horror I had left behind.